Welcome to Commander Center episode 203, and today we're going to kind of live brew a Cazur and Ukkima deck. I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.
How's it going, Max?
Pretty good. Recording on another Friday afternoon. It's supposed to be warm and overcasted this fine long weekend, so...
It is. It's a holiday weekend as well, so people will be listening to the show hopefully on their holiday Monday while they grill out and enjoy Memorial Day. And I'll quick explain the episode name there, because we have live brewed decks in the past. This isn't gonna quite be that, because I kind of have an idea of what I want this deck to be, and I might build it myself too. So there's some parts there. We're just gonna this is more of a live talk about my deck building process to a degree, because I'm in the middle of maybe building this deck, or maybe converting a new deck that I recently built to this deck. We'll see. Before we get into that, I did get to play a few games this week on webcam. The EDH Recast played, and we had Chase, who people probably know as Mana Curves on Twitter and Twitch and a bunch of social media platforms, who was a lot of fun to play with. We had some good games. We had a few technical glitches. It was our first night using Spell Table, which is fantastic. I highly recommend anyone try to use it. But we had a really choppy first game, and I think that's when you came in to watch the stream, Mac.
Yes.
And so I think it was pretty choppy at first. Matt Morgan made a few changes to fix that. And I think next week when we try it, I'm actually going to do the streaming, because my computer is faster than his. I've got a relatively new machine and he doesn't. So I think that's going to fix some of those issues. But then, literally at the very end of the night, Chase... her internet crashed, and then she couldn't get it back up. She had to call her ISP. And literally as that happened and she dropped out, Magic Mike's did a raid. So,
oh, no.
So the game stopped. We're talking on stream we'll see if Chase comes back. And then 140 people have joined you. And I'm oh no. And to make it even worse, because of the issues we had early on with lag, we were 5 minutes behind at that point, because when you get chop, it continuously is pushing that buffer back. So what we were doing as we were playing on Spell Table and what people were seeing on Twitch was literally a 5-minute delay.
Yeah, that definitely would be what I was experiencing early in the stream.
Oh, it was so everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. That was a little frustrating, but I think by next week we'll have ironed most of those bugs out. Hopefully we don't get a raid of 150 people that pop in just as everything falls apart. So, but they were fun games. We had a good time. Joey did some generous stuff like Joey is wont to do. The last game, right before she dropped to, Chase was playing her Chandra tribal deck. And the commander's Origin Chandra who flips. None of us had anything. She opens with her Chandra, I think on turn 2, was able to flip it very quickly, had another one out. So she was literally about to make 2 Chandra emblems, which would have put us on a pretty serious clock, because one of them was a lightning bolt during your upkeep or something, and I can't remember what the other one was. It was about to go very badly for all of us anyway. So that was an unfortunate end to the evening, but it was fun. And then we're going to play, we mentioned we're recording this on Friday, we're going to play some games this weekend with a few patron supporters, which is hopefully our plan moving forward here for the foreseeable future. We will reach out to people and get some games scheduled. There's a lot of people that want to play, and we just have a finite amount of time to get games in with people, given that, life is coming at us pretty fast these days. But we will try to get games in every Saturday, I think, with a couple listeners if we can.
Yep.
So our first go at that will be this Saturday, and we will report back, I'm sure, on a show in the next week or two about how that all went. And speaking of patron supporters, Max, anybody want to shout out here briefly?
Yeah, we want to say hello and thank you to Wes Allen for supporting us on Patreon.
Yes, thank you very, very much. And we also will have a patron announcement here coming up, I would guess in the next 2 weeks-ish. We're getting some art done. Max, I won't go into, I almost said something, I won't go into any more specifics than that. We will have an announcement coming. We're getting some work done. It's mostly finished, but I'll wait till everything is all the way in the can here before we say anything, but expect something to be coming in the fairly near future for patron supporters. And for people that don't support the show, it might be a little bit of a lever to get you to sign up. So that will be coming in the near future. Any other final news or anything we need to talk about here, Max?
We got double masters announced yesterday.
We did, that's right. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm excited. I mean, I'm always been a fan of the Masters products. I'm not shocked they're returning only after 18 months of the announcement of we're taking a break from Masters products, but I'm liking what I'm seeing. You know, the Mana Vault, the Mana Crypt, the Traxa, the Blightsteel Colossus, and the doubling season, all getting those awesome showcase art cards now going forward in these products. I'm really liking that. I like those fancier versions of the art that Wizards is doing now, so I definitely will be looking forward to getting a box.
Yeah, because we're functionally going to get basically essentially 2 Masters sets this year. The Legends isn't a Master set, but there's going to be a good amount of reprints in there as well, the Commander Legends product in November-ish. So, that's half a Master set, and then this one is a actual Master set with twice as many rares or mythics in it. Yeah, the cards have been really good. I like the alt art, the box toppers. The one thing, and I'm probably in the minority here, I can't stand Mana Crypt. I don't like seeing Mana Crypt reprints. It's the one card in the game right now that super feels like you're buying a win. And I don't know what the alternative is. And I guess reprints decrease the value and make it maybe easier so it doesn't feel like you're buying a win. But they don't decrease the value of it that much. It's still going to be a $100 card. So it's going to do is, it's probably good for CEDH because, it makes things cheaper in those decks where everyone runs them. But outside of CEDH, it just makes it kind of a pack lottery. So, one person who didn't have a Mana Crypt before and happens to buy one pack and happens to crack one open now slams one into one of their decks that now has a disproportionate power edge if they happen to draw it early over everybody else who still can't afford one. I just don't like the card. I think it's kind of a lose-lose situation with it, but that's my one complaint is Mana Crypt and whatever. It's a pretty minor thing. What are they going to do? Not print it too? Then it becomes a $400 card, and that's insane. So there's just no solution other than ban Mana Crypt, Sheldon, which I'm not even sure is a good call either necessarily. So I say that, but I'm not even sure I believe myself when I say that. So, but yeah, the double rares and or mythics in it's kind of cool too.
Double foils
possibly too. We might get some foils that we haven't seen before, something I'm always looking forward to. And it's just good to get things out there in people's hands. So no fetch lands though.
No fetch lands, of course not. Why would they? Because this is the perfect place to put them.
Yeah,
but, whatever.
Don't know what the thought process is there. But we're not getting fetches, but we will be grateful for the things we will be getting, hopefully. So kind of look at the positive. All right, if you out there in listener land like to reach out to us and tell me how I am so very wrong to say ban Mana Crypt, how would you do that, Max?
You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. Hit us up on Facebook searching CMDR Central. Comment on our YouTube shows by searching CMDR Central or, just Google us. Just don't go too deep.
Absolutely. You can also find us at patreon.com, as we mentioned before.
Yeah, head over to patreon.com, search CMDR Central, and you will check out our reward tiers. And if you are so inclined to support us, we always graciously appreciate that.
And hey, if you can't, because things are difficult right now, we completely understand it. Just give us a like or an upvote on whatever application you use to listen to the show. That's something we would absolutely appreciate, and we totally understand how difficult it is, especially these days, to find a little bit of money to support shows. So we totally get it, but any support you can get, even if it's just a mouse click, we would appreciate it. All right, Max, should we jump into this?
Let's do this.
Okay, so first of all, let's explain my other deck. So a few weeks back, I built a Temrith the Murder King Infect deck. I had wanted a Rakdos deck. I've been, I'm always looking to build a deck that does something slightly differently than the other decks I have currently. So I wanted something definitely that wasn't maybe creature combat based, but I'm not a combo player either. Infect kind of makes sense to fill that void. It's Rakdos, it's interesting. Temrith doesn't get played very much, so it hits a lot of bases there for me. I like to be a little bit of a hipster about those kind of things too. And the deck's been pretty fun so far. There are some problems with it, though, and they're problems that are going to be kind of tricky to fix. For starters, the plan is to run Infect creatures, get poison counters on people, and then give Temrith Infect. It uses ability to sacrifice creatures that deal damage to people to then rack up that poison or proliferate or whatever. So there's multiple paths there. I can either proliferate poison already on people, give Temrith Infect, and directly do it, swing with some Infect creatures. The limitations, though, red and black have not that many great Infect creatures. You're missing out on all the good stuff in blue and green in particular. there's a lot of moving pieces in that deck. I need to have the usual suite of removal and answers and card draw, but I have to have X amount of ways to give Timrid Infect. I have to have X amount of ways to generate bodies that I can sacrifice a Timrid to then have him with Infect deal damage to people. So, whether it's Bitter Blossom that I can use a token every turn from, or Resembling Skeleton that I can sacrifice to then replay it, sacrifice it again. There's just a lot of things I'm trying to make happen in the deck, and I've got them all wedged in there right now, but it's really, really tight. And even after playing it the first night, I was like, I think I need 1 or 2 more draw spells here. Looking at the deck, I'm like, okay, well, what do I take out? Because I just have a lot of things going on already. Additionally, so many of the creatures, like I said, aren't that great. You're missing out on some really decent Infect bodies in green and blue, and you're missing out on some really, really fantastic proliferate effects as well. So I'm kind of heavily neutered in a lot of ways. There's a lot going on, and I'm missing a lot of good stuff. Enter Ukkima and Cazur. And this was Max's idea.
Yeah, so originally we were going to do a live deck build today on one of the partner commanders from Commander 20. My original suggestion was the Shark Boy and Lava Girl.
Right.
Shabraz and Braylon. But because I'm the scumbag, I found the combo that goes infinite really easily. So, we didn't want to do that. And so I'm like, well, I'm really interested in Ukkima because I played against an Ukkima deck before. And then I'm like, well, what if we did Ukkima and Cazur Infect? Because, you have Timuret, but it has its shortcomings.
Right.
And 5 minutes later, Dana, you were like, yeah, I already kind of like this idea. Let's do it. So here we are. And since yesterday afternoon, folks, Dana already kind of has something sketched up.
Right. So I went from, first of all, saying, that's a good idea, let's do that, to, oh man, that's a better version of Timuret, to, okay, maybe I want to just make Timuret into this deck instead, to actually brewing a good chunk of the deck already on paper. So it's not so much a live brew where we're trying to just go over it live, because I already have a good chunk of a deck here. And in part, I think we're going to talk about just the things, if I were to make that change, what I would change over and why I would do it. So this isn't kind of us discovering a deck or building one. It's me already having built a chunk of one. If I do decide to make that change, and explaining the choices I'm making and why I would be doing it. So hopefully that makes sense, and it's also lets us do something a little bit different, and it lets us kind of share my thought process when it comes to building decks, that kind of thing. So let's start it off here. We'll read the commanders to you, Max. You want to do that quick?
Yeah, so Cazur Ruthless Stalker is 3 and a green for a 3/3 legendary human warrior. He partners with Ukkima, and he reads, whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. And then Ukkima's Stalking Shadow is 1 blue and a black for a 2/2 legendary whale wolf. I really hope that's the theme of this deck, is whales and wolves, because I'm all in for it. Ukkima can't be blocked, and when Ukkima leaves the battlefield, it deals X damage to target player, and you gain X life, where X is its power.
So, first of all, we did a show recently where we talked about the things you need to be aware of when you brew 3 colors, and how, at least for me, it gets kind of challenging to make cuts. For starters, this, if you want to, gives you the option to basically play it as a 2-color deck. If all you really care about here is casting Ukkima and you want to splash green, you could do that. That's not the case here. I've got a good mix in the rough version I'm doing, but you could very easily do this. I am not probably ever going to cast Cazur in the deck. I mean, I will at times, but it's not at all remotely part of my plan. It's an option if I need a body out as a blocker or something, but this is mostly going to be revolving around Ukkima, doing a very similar thing to what I did in my Timuret deck, where I'm going to use some enchantments or artifacts to give Ukkima Infect, and then swing first to get some Infect on somebody else, and then have the option to sacrifice a blanket, whatever, to give more Infect counters on people, in addition to the Infect bodies I would be running. So that's what my plan would be. It's going to function very similarly to Timuret, though instead of using Timuret to sacrifice creatures, I would be sacrificing or blinking Ukkima itself. Land base, nothing special here. No dual lands, ABUR duals, given that Bayou and Tropical Island and Underground Sea is literally the worst possible combination of dual lands you have to worry about in a deck, an ABUR dual, so I'm not going to spend $1,200 on dual lands. I do have shock lands from when I played and drafted quite a bit of Return to Ravnica, and they were just available Ravnica sets, so they're not cheap, but they're, available at the very least, and I have them. I would run those duels. I will probably run both of the Tri-lands, the new Triome, as well as Opulent Palace from back in Khan's block. There's things like City of Brass and Mana Confluence and Command Tower, obviously, that make all the colors you need. There's fetch lands, whether you want to run the good ones or the slower ones. There's things like Ash Barrens that will get you one of anything. Fabled Passage, Prismatic Vista that will get you, whatever basic land you need to fix your colors. So there's a lot you can do in a 3-color deck to make sure you have whatever colors you need. That's what I'd be looking at for a land base. Additionally, I would probably be filling out the utility land slots. Obviously some land removal lands and scavenger grounds, but there's a lot of things in those slots you can run. First of all, Blink Moth Nexus to give you one more infect body, but there's things like Endless Sands that let you spend 2 mana to exile target creature you control. Just exile Ukkima to deal infect damage to somebody and then recast it. You have things like High Market and Phyrexian Tower that let you sacrifice Ukkima, again, to generate that ETB. Exit the battlefield trigger, I guess, in this case, to get that damage out there onto people. Rogue's Passage if you need to poke some damage through unblockable, although Ukkima already is unblockable. Mirror in the Moaning Well, another land you can use to sacrifice a creature. So that's where our main utility land focus would be, onto sack outlets and blink outlets, I guess, like Endless Sands, to get that trigger off Ukkima. Is there anything special you were thinking of, Max, in land slots here at all?
No, I mean, you have the few I was thinking of, like the Blink Moth Nexus, just another infect body.
Yep.
I originally was thinking like, hey, let's try to do like a little bit of +1/+1 counters with Cazur, but if you're not going to probably be using him a lot, then, stuff like the Graft land probably isn't worth a slot. Especially in 3 colors. You already have a couple lands that come in tapped, and the fewer of those, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think there's probably people going with that +1 counter synergy or buff synergy or something. They're looking to probably use Ukkima like as a one-shot. I'm going to get in a position where I can buff Ukkima, hit one person to kill them, and then, blink or sacrifice Ukkima to kill somebody else. I'm probably going to go more of a spread it out way here, where I have a bunch of other creatures in effect too, so I can, if I happen to not have Ukkima out or someone steals it or something, I still have plenty of other ways to do it without relying on my commander, which is kind of how I like to play. I like to have the commander be part of the strategy, but I don't want to have it be the be all and end all either. If it's gone, I want to be able to function. So I think at least the way I'm building it, the deck should kind of work that way.
Okay, makes sense to me.
It's green, so I'm kind of leaning here into green ramp. Obviously, Soul Ring is so good that I have a Soul Ring in here, but other than that, it's mostly the typical green sorcery speed land ramp package. Cultivate, Farseek, Kadama's Reach, Nature's Lore, Rampant Growth. I think that's what I have in here right now, along with Soul Ring. So I probably could maybe even use 1 or 2 more ramp cards, but this is, like I said, my first pass, so the deck isn't done. But that's where I'm at. That's the plan, Hey, maybe I'll crack open that Mana Crypt, right?
Hey, maybe. I got spare.
Actually, I'm probably certain I have one I'm not using too, but it's not a card I generally like running. So that's roughly the land ramp package. Nothing too fancy or crazy there. I've seen people running, I guess I'm not sure Food Chain would count as ramp really, but I've seen a lot of Food Chain decks where people are, sacrifice Ukkima to Food Chain to recast Ukkima. You're down 1 mana, I guess, because of command tax every time, but it will still let you do a lot of damage, but I really don't want to go that route. I think that's kind of the CEDH build, and that's not really what I'm looking to do here. Removal package, 3 colors, you have a lot of options. I'm going to be running Beast Within, hits any target at all. Assassin's Trophy is in here. Reality Shift is an option as well. And there's a couple of not the greatest removal spells, but Tainted Strike, not Tainted Strike, Virulent Wound, put a -1 counter on target creature. When that creature is put into a graveyard this turn, its controller gets a poison counter. So, I can kill 1/1 with it. The poison counter thing is very, very useful. I have a lot of proliferate effects here, so that -1 counter can very easily become, 2 -1 counters or 3 -1 counters if I need to. So, not a perfect creature removal spell, but it's not necessarily bad either.
I really like this one for in response to a Wrath. Hey, let's make sure, that creature gets a -1/-1 counter on it. It's going to die anyways. So now that person who maybe doesn't have a poison counter has one and is on,
right,
and is ready to be proliferated so you can win the game.
I mean, worst case scenario, you cast it on somebody else's removal, and sometimes you can get extra value out of it too, where someone goes to block something and thinks their creature will survive. You can kill it with this too. It's not amazing, but the utility is fairly useful here. I also have Pistis Strike in here.
I don't like this card.
2-1, destroy target creature with flying and its controller gets a poison counter.
I don't like that.
There's almost always a target, at least where we play. I just can't think of the last time I have played a game where there wasn't some semi-scary flyer in play. Maybe that's because I play you a lot, but people tend to play flyers. There's a lot of dragons and demons and angels out there.
I am hurt by that I am the target of this card.
I would guess Corrupted Conscious probably counts as a removal spell here as well. It's basically a steal control of a creature spell, and the creature gains infect. So it's on theme with what I'm doing. It's going to count as creature removal in that I will gain control of that creature. I have a couple sweepers, Damnation here, as well as Cyclonic Rift, I guess, counts as a sweeper as well. I probably need one more board wipe. I really don't know. I didn't put in Toxic Deluge because it's not going to work with Ukkima. It kind of nombos because it reduces the power to 0, so it won't do damage. I like the option of being able to cast a board and also have Ukkima do its infect thing, and Deluge kind of runs counter to that, so I don't have Deluge in here, at least at my first pass.
Would this be a deck, since we're in green and you're going to want to be able to draw cards, something like Decree of Pain just might be worth it at 7 mana to do that in this deck?
Maybe, because it's not a really fast deck. I'm not planning on aggroing anybody out or winning with it. It's going to move relatively slowly. So I thought about that. That was one that I had considered when I was doing the pass too, and it maybe. It's kind of a greedy card, but it's also fun. Mm-hmm. So yeah, possibly. I also have Contagion Engine and Contagion Class, which puts -1 counters on things. I don't know if I'll call them necessarily removal spells, but they will kind of work that way also. So yeah, that's the base removal package here I'm kind of starting with. There's a few other small things too, like Yawgmoth's Physician puts -1 counters on creatures. There's a couple of things like that to a degree will work. So I do have enough removal spells to get me through. We'll have to play some games and see if it's actually enough, but that's the plan for removal. I've got a small draw package that's not very different than what I usually run, or what I'm currently running even in that Timera deck. Read the Bone, Sign of Blood, Night's Whisper. I added the green sacrifice ones in here, which seem useful to Ukkima if it's big enough. Run a Momentous Fall or a Life's Legacy, so you can draw cards simultaneously with the thing you were trying to do, which is get that commander to leave the battlefield to generate damage onto people anyway. So I have a couple of those in there. Sylvan Library to do some combination of drawing and top deck manipulation. Phyrexian Arena, get some gas every turn. I keep saying this, I guess, but I'm not sure that's enough draw necessarily either.
No.
We will find out as we go. Yawgmoth also has draw baked in there. So that's where and I shouldn't say that's all of it either. I have things like Contentious Plan, which draws me a card while proliferating. Same with Tezzret's Gambit. So I am running a few less than optimal draw effects just because they also happen to work with poison counters and proliferating those poison counters.
Yeah.
So those are the main components that I always want to start with in a deck before I start getting into things that work with whatever the strategy I have going on is. So I think next we'll take a look here and talk about ways to enable Infect onto Ukkima. Most of these are ones I'm currently running in that Timera deck. So technically, Corrupted Conscious can be put on my own creature. So if I need to, I can put that on Ukkima to give Ukkima Infect when I swing through unblockable or leave the battlefield. That's one option. Glistening Oil is an enchantment. It gives a creature Infect. And at the beginning of your upkeep, put a -1 counter on enchanted creature. So it's one you have to be a little bit careful with and put it on a creature when you aren't afraid to have it get a few counters on it. The other advantage here on Glistening Oil, especially if it goes on Ukkima, if Ukkima dies or gets exiled or whatever, and Glistening Oil goes to the graveyard, if it's put in the graveyard from the battlefield, return it to its owner's hand. So it's one that you can reuse, which is very, very useful, particularly since I'm planning on blinking or killing that commander quite a bit. There's Phyresis, which is just a 2-mana aura that gives a creature Infect. There is Crafted Exoskeleton, which is an equipment, so that's nice because it's reusable and it buffs Ukkima. Very, very useful. Another way to give it Infect. Snake Cult Initiation. It's an aura. A creature has Poisonous 3, which is an Infect. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player gets 3 poison counters. So it doesn't do the -1 counters version of it. But it also doesn't really care about how much damage is dealt. They just get 3 poison regardless of how big the creature is. The downside of this one is it doesn't work with Ukkima's Exit the Battlefield ability because this is only on combat damage. But the fact that Ukkima is unblockable, just swing through, and if it happens to have, even if it doesn't have an effect on it, it's worth putting 3 poison counters on somebody. And there's also a handful of creatures with flying in here or trample. It's worth putting on there too. So there's plenty of good targets for Snake Cult Initiation. So that's one more way to get Infect onto Ukkima or something else. Tainted Strike that I accidentally mentioned before. Creature gets Infect. Triumph for the Hordes, kind of an old school overrun that gives all your creatures Infect, and I can use it as an overrun, or if I need to use it just on Ukkima, I can do that as well. So multiple ways to give creatures Infect, particularly Ukkima. There's also quite a few things in here in terms of creatures that have Infect. Blighted Agent has evasion, so it's it's unblockable as well. Nice target for Snake Cult Initiation. Flesh Eater Imp has flying, so it has evasion. Another good target for Initiation, and it has Infect itself. Guild Informant is something I'll mention when I get into proliferate stuff, but it has flying, so it's a good target for the Snake Cult Initiation. Icarats just puts poison on people when it comes into play. Phyrexian Crusader, protection from red and black, so it has some evasion there as well. Tough to remove, another good target for Snake Cult. Phyrexian Hydra has a big body with Infect, it's kind of tough to kill. Phyrexian Swarmlord, another big body, and it makes tokens that have Infect. You have little things like Plague Mirror, which is just useful as a mana dork, but it has Infect. Plague Stinger, again, has evasion, so it can get through, and I would for sure put Snake Cult on there. Putrefax, large body with Infect and Trample and Haste. Super useful. Rolesk, another proliferate enabler, but flying and trample, so more evasion, good to get through, good for Snake Cult. Spinebiter's a big body. Swamp Mosquito just has poisonous, but it has flying and it has evasion. And there's one actually that's not even on this list currently, and I'm going to add it right now because it's just one I overlooked, and it is in my Timuret deck, and that is Sakatwa Assassin, which is just an unblockable creature that also has poisonous like Swamp Mosquito. Thrumming Bird, evasion, does proliferate stuff. Viral Drake, evasion with flying, has Infect. Verdant Corruptor is just useful because it ETBs and destroys an artifact and has Infect. So there's a lot of Infect bodies, primarily what I'm running among creatures, and anything that doesn't have Infect or poisonous probably has proliferate. I mentioned a couple already, but there's things like Evolution Sage, so whenever a land comes into play, I can roll up those poison counters on people, and I have multiple fetch lands in the land base, as well as all the green land ramp that works with that, so once I get some poison on people, then I can proliferate that up with Evolution Sage or any of the other multiple proliferate effects I have in here, like Flux Channeler or Guildpact Informant, or things I mentioned earlier, like Steady Progress and Tezzereth's Gambit. So basically, it's proliferate effects and infect and poison effects. And that's the basic deck. I don't have counter spells in here really, except for a Fuel for the Cause, because it proliferates. I don't have room. But the problem with these kind of decks is the same problem with Timuret to a degree. I'm trying to have so many things happen or so many different things going on that there's just not room for something, and that's the only counterspell I really had room for.
Okay.
Hatred's in here as well as an instant speed combat trick just to buff up whatever happens to get through with Infect, or even sometimes the lethal commander damage. I'll trade life. I do think it's useful to have more graveyard recursion than I actually usually run, particularly because if I'm going to be sacrificing Ukkima, a few times when it has Infect or Poison on it, those enchantments or auras, with the exception of Contagion Engine and Glistening Oil, go to the graveyard. And I don't want to get to see those get milled away, or I'm going to want to be able to get them back and reuse them again. So a regrowth, or if you happen to have one, a Yawgmoth's Will would be useful here. So yeah, that's the first pass I kind of took at this deck. And you have some ideas too, Max. You were kind of going over this as well. So let's shift over. I've been talking a lot here about what I was looking to do. What have you set down for yourself?
So far, I really like the outline of this deck. I think you're at, 105 cards? So yeah, it's getting there. And it'll probably be there by the end of the weekend, or probably by the end of the day, to be honest.
If I'm at 105, that means I'll probably go up to 110 or 12 before I then have to cut it back down to get down to 100.
So when I originally started thinking about this, I wasn't more the sacrifice route like you're kind of going, but more the blink. So yep. I would run, if this was my list, I would run stuff like Thassa Deep Dwelling, which is just a Conjurer's Closet on a body. Conjurer's Closet itself I would run. along with maybe like Ghostly Flicker and those instant speed flicker cards, just because, if someone goes to remove it after combat or even during combat, that's a quick way to still get that exile and get Ukkima back versus it going to the graveyard or the command zone and costing a bajillion mana on turn 12.
And if I think about this, or like this is so early in the development process, I haven't even really goldfished anything yet. It's entirely possible I'll start goldfishing and realizing like, oh man, the plan to sacrifice Ukkima is going to get out of control too quickly in terms of how much it costs, and I need to look into blink effects instead. So that's something that it's entirely possible I will have to do more of and less of the sacrifice stuff. I think I can totally see that being the case.
Second, I definitely agree. You need a lot more graveyard recursion besides just the cards that are doing it on their own. So even adding like a regrowth, or I know it's not your favorite card, but Seasons Past might be really good in this deck since it's not. You have a fetch lands, so there's already something you're getting back. You're getting back some low-costed ramp spells, or maybe getting back, a draw spell, along with, a few creatures and any other enchantments you need to help win the game. So that's something I would definitely try. I know that's always been a card for you that it works well for others and never really works for you, though.
Yes.
I want to hear your thoughts on Throne of Geth in the current list.
I like Throne of Geth in my Zero deck because being able to, like, even if you do nothing else but cast it for 2 mana and sacrifice it and put 1 more loyalty counter on all of your planeswalkers, it's almost always worth it to do that. I don't know if that's the case here necessarily, so I put it in because I was putting proliferate effects in.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that's the situation here, particularly because I only have 5 artifacts. So like basically, what am I going to sacrifice to it? I mean, a Soul Ring or itself. So it's going to be a one-shot effect, and I would guess when I start making cuts to get down to 100, Throne of Geth probably comes out.
Right, or I was just thinking maybe this is an Arcane Signet, and then you kind of fix that ramp a little better. You mentioned that earlier, that one more piece might be worth it, and maybe just throw an Arcane Signet in. You're covered for your colors, and you're ready to rock and roll.
That makes sense with the Arcane Signet. I also could look to do something like put in Snowlands and run into the north because of the things like the landfall proliferate effect. I don't know if it's, 6 1 half dozen the other. I don't know if it's that big of a deal, but being able to have one more way to get that landfall trigger, if there's really no downside to it, might be worth doing. So that's something I could consider in that slot as well. But I agree, when all is said and done, Throne of Geth definitely probably comes out.
Yeah. So the final thing I would do if this was like my list I was building would be go a little heavier on the pump spells, make it this more of like a combat-based deck. So, I mean, you're already running stuff like Berserk and Hatred and Tainted Strike, but even adding something like a Giant Growth or just those really cheap 1 mana, 2 mana pump spells in green that still leave you mana open to do tricks maybe in your second main phase or cast other things could really go a long way if you just, you put Grafted Exoskeleton on Ukkima and then you swing and then you give it +3/+3 from a Giant Growth, you're hitting someone for 5. And that was, 3 mana worth, if that included the equip of the Grafted Exoskeleton?
Yeah.
So that would be kind of what I would do a little differently, is just add more pump spells, make this more combat, especially because the main commander we're going to be using is unblockable. If you can get Ukkima to hit someone for 5 and you blink it with a Thassa, you just hit that other person for another 5 infect. They're out, So I guess that would be my main goal, is try to get to, 5 poison counters, 6 poison counters as fast as possible on all the players.
Mm-hmm.
So using pump spells, I think, is the most efficient way to do that.
Yeah, I think in the case, I think this deck has a lot of some kind of similar problems with the Timurit deck, where there's a lot of different things I have to be doing. I need to have Infect Enablers. I need to have, in this deck, Pump Enablers. In that deck, it was Sack Fodder. So I'm still trying to pack like 120 cards into a 100-card deck. Except for these cards are better. I think that's the difference.
For sure, yeah.
In another deck, I really found out that it's really easy to get 2 infect or 3 infect on people, and it's really tough to get up to 10. And a couple times I've done it, it's because I've used like Arc Bond that just out of nowhere, because somebody blocks with like a 7-power creature, I do it. But like if I'm trying to do it based on what the deck's built to do, it's much more challenging. I think it will be much, much easier to do it here, doing it that way.
Oh, for sure. But otherwise, I think this is awesome. I love that you took this idea and ran with it. I do like this idea a little better than Timurit. I think what you're doing with Timurit is great because of all the reasons you said. It's an underplayed commander. It's a cool way to do Infect. It's a color combination I don't typically see you play, then that would be Rakdos, but it's very rare when I see you play 3 colors, and I think that's what's nudging this ahead of Timuret in my book.
Well, I'm torn. I did want a Rakdos deck, and I do want a Rakdos deck, but yes, I think this is just going to do the same thing I'm trying to do for the most part better. So yeah, I'm unsure. This is also kind of I hate to be me, but it's semi-popular and it's new, and that always kind of bugs me. But I think maybe I also need to just force myself to get over that nonsense by playing new cards or new commanders too. So that's also part of the impetus that's making me want to do this a little bit, as I kind of try to force myself out of my shell in a couple ways. Number 1, playing 3 color. Number 2, playing something that's new and semi-popular. I think that's probably a useful exercise as well. So I'm somewhat leaning that direction for sure right now. And then I can just take that Rakdos shell, the land base and stuff I have together already, and set that aside in a deck box or something, and be like, at some point I will figure out a Rakdos deck, and I already have the land base and a few of the basic cards I will run, like Chaos Warp, already sleeved up and set aside. So that might be what I do. I have not decided yet. But I'll be curious what listeners have to say here. Should I make the switch? Should I turn Timuret into this? Should I not? And if I do, what other cards would be useful here that maybe we missed? If you have any feedback and want to reach out to us and tell us any ideas you have for this deck, that would be fantastic. I'd appreciate it. Any final thoughts from you here, Max?
No, I think I'm ready to rock and roll out of here and get ready to play some games this weekend.
Yes, I am too. This will not be ready to play this weekend. I will be playing Timuret, however, at some point. But I would say probably by the time we do a show, because we're not going to do a Thursday show this week. We will be back next week with 2. Hopefully, maybe by next week, I'll have made a decision one way or the other, and I can start putting this deck together if I want to do it. But yeah, anyone has any thoughts, share them with us. We would love to hear them about the possibility of building this Infect deck. So until next time, I'm Dana. You can find me on the Twitter birds at Dana Roach. You can find Max at CMDR_Max, and you can find Chris at WiseSquishy1. You can also find our editor, Rafael Garcia, on the Twitter birds at Ursa Bearwalker. Our podcast theme is Retro Future Dirty by Kevin McLeod, licensed via Creative Commons. And we'll be back next Monday with a new show. Until then, I'm Dana.
And I'm Max.